We are gathering from countries around the world. Over 15 countries, I believe, are represented in our registration pool. And we are so honored by each of your presence in this space. I don't know, as I said, what you left to join this space, but I know we are here together. And so I want to invite us just into a centering moment. This is just a chance to pay attention to where you find yourself in this moment. You might pay attention to the space that you're in, look around. Perhaps you might notice how the light is coming into your space. You might take a moment just to pay attention to how your body feels in this space. Are you comfortable? Is there anything you need as you're gathering here? And I'll invite us all just to hold a moment of quiet, of stillness, and to invite some attention around our breath. And I'll let you do that at your own pace. So we'll just hold a moment of quiet and centering. Thank you, friends. Again, my name is Catherine McKelvin, and I am the Executive Director at the Center for Courage and Renewal. I'm really delighted to be welcoming all of you into this space. At the Center for Courage and Renewal, we exist to nurture deep integrity and relational trust, and we do that because we believe it builds the foundation for a more loving, equitable, and healthy world. One of the ways that we live our mission in the world is that we cultivate communities of reflection and practice that help people align their inner lives with their public expressions of life and leadership, with their full humanity. And I'm especially grateful to be able to welcome into our space today Terry Tempest Williams, Parker J. Palmer, who are two people who have spent an awful lot of time around the intersection of inner life and how it leads us to show up in the world. Um, I feel like Terry and Parker are people who have been in conversation with each other through their writing for as long as have been aware of both of them in the world. They write at so many intersections. Very quite literally about intersections and the interconnectedness of all things, the importance of moral courage, of authenticity, of what we can learn from the natural world, of beauty and attentiveness. And they both know deeply that in the urgency of our times, it's especially important that we slow down and take the time to listen deeply and be deeply present with one another. And so it's really wonderful to be inviting Parker, you and Terry into the conversation that you are going to hold with one another. And I want to make sure that we have time for that conversation to unfold. Just to let everyone know how our full time together is going to unfold in just a moment, I'm going to hand it over, Parker, to you and um, Terry to begin our conversation. And we will listen to whatever you have to share with us for about 35 minutes or so. And then we'll also have an opportunity to open up the chat for questions that you may be holding, those of you who are listening both to the conversations, but also listening to what's coming up within you as you listen. That's another place where it's really important to turn our attention. And then we'll have a time to just kind of close, learn a little bit more about the Center for Courage and Renewal and our work and how to connect and be involved. And then we'll move on to whatever else our days hold, having been blessed by this time. Without further ado, Parker, I would love to put us in your very capable hands.
Well, thank you, Catherine. And as we get started, let me ask you to be a timekeeper today, because I know I'm going to get so enchanted by whatever happens here, so drawn in, that I will lose track of time and probably my own common sense. Terry, it is so wonderful to be in your presence right now. I've wanted a conversation like this for so many years. And as Catherine said, we have been conversation partners through our writing. So the warmest welcome to this platform and to this conversation. Thank you for doing it.
I to all of you who are joining us, what you didn't see is the absolute joy of. I just don't have words. It's such an honor, Parker. You have been so important to my thinking, to the notion of democracy, to finding beauty in a broken world. What you're doing with this beautiful celebration of all that is hidden. I feel in such alignment with you, and it's hard to find my grounding because I just am so thrilled to be in your presence.
Well, back at you. And I think together we'll find our grounding, even though it's a little tipsy right now. Thank you. So we have such a brief time together, and there's so much that I'd like to touch in on, including feelings and thoughts and places that your book, The Glorians, evoked in me. Your whole journey really has evoked in me. But what I'd like to do for starters is to describe what I see as the arc of the book, um, from soup to nuts, as it were. And for me, that it creates a force field that gives you and me and this audience a shared place to start. And then just find out where within that force field you and I might want to go in conversation, if that feels like a good way to go.
Beautiful.
So, as the book begins, it's March 11th, 2020. The COVID pandemic is underway, and the world goes into lockdown with a sense of doom upon doom. A week later, you have a dream in which a voice tells you about a vow you once took. Your vow is the epic documentation of the Glorians. With no idea of what a Glorian is, you begin to inquire from your home in Utah's Red Rock Desert. And you write this: in late spring of 2020, fierce winds converge in our valley. The winds are particularly strong one morning in May. I'm outside admiring the coyote willow draped in magenta flowers, each one resembling a snapdragon blossom, the length of my index finger. Suddenly, in a swoop of wind, our stone patio is strewn with flowers. I bend down to pick one up, only to see it move. Not only does it move, it has legs. I realize the blossom is being transported by an ant. This wee little being appears as a small black boat with a large pink sail above its six-legged body. I follow it. And following it gave you the first clue as to what a Glorian is. The arc that begins there takes us to these words at the end of the book. I am seeking a new language to help me name what I cannot define, like the Glorians, and all that is ineffable, driven by the beauty of Earth herself. The burden I carry is knowing I will always fall short in the conveyance of beauty. The Glorians are reaching out to us inviting us to engage. They arrive unplanned, unearned, irrefutable. They are grace. We are dreamers, and I believe Earth is dreaming us into a new way of being, with Venus shining in the twilight of dawn as my witness. Something deeper than hope is emerging. The coyote willow's magenta blossoms have just burst forth for the first time this year. So we come back to where we started with the mystery of the Glorians. And in the context of this conversation, even though the book ends there, I want to add one more line from you that speaks to me of what I need to be doing in the force field of 21st century life. You write, by reimagining home, we create a place and a peace for all we stand to gain, a livable future in a landscape of burning hearts that implores us to stay soft when things become hard and stay strong when things fall apart.
Mm.
Where would you like to start?
Thank you so much for sharing that. And as a writer, your work from the inside out, but you don't know it from the outside in. So you just gave me a gift, because I'm still trying to figure out what the Glorians are. And in that dream, as you said, the vow that I forgot is the epic documentation of the Glorians. And you actually helped me in your book of wholeness, of all that's hidden wholeness, those two words together. And in the afterword, I just want to read back your words that really helped me. You talked about the ineffable and establishing the conditions for wholeness. And you say, it is called by many names. And you talk about integrity, identity, a million different words. And you say, what you call it doesn't matter to me. No one knows what its true name is, but giving it some sort of name matters a great deal, because if it goes unnamed, it goes unrecognized, and we will never try to access its power to renew the self and the world. And I think this is an example, Parker, of how we have been on parallel paths. The poem that you wrote about in your Substack, I just loved that, by Janine Lohman. And there was one thing that she talked about: did you get a straw parallel to the river? I think we both are trying to put our straws parallel to this river of life and wonder and beauty and brokenness. And I think that's the attempt, and writing is always an attempt. But I think for me, the Glorians is an echo to Simone Weil when she says attention is a prayer. Mm-hmm. I think it's when we are met by another presence and our full attention is warranted. And that could be a plant, an animal, a memory, a moment. And it's not just beautiful moments. It's not just revelatory moments like following that ant. In the pandemic, all we have is time. And I think I spent an hour watching this wee little thing move through the desert. And just at the point where I thought, oh, there's a prickly pear patch ahead, it's going to be impaled. Out of nowhere, seemingly, attending ants appeared and lifted that blossom up through around those spines and then onto the bare desert ground again. They disappear. The ant continues. Not only that, but I think the pandemic itself commanded our attention. And you could say the pandemic was a Glorian. Again, what do we call those things that ask us to be completely present? And I think the notion that if we are present, we will know what to do. And I think one of my questions for you is, how do we be present as we watch so much of what we love disappear? or be taken or be corrupted, whether it's democracy or whether it's the boundary waters.
Mhm. Mhm. Hmm. Yeah. And of course, that's my question for you too. And what really strikes me about what we're talking about right now is that when you write and you try to process life that way, you get to this point, you've written about this, where you realize the words just don't work. And yet somehow you need to approximate what works as closely as you know how. But it leaves a task to the reader, which is to fill the space between wherever you leave off and wherever the unspeakable or that which can't be put into words begins. There's this creative space in there, this liminal space where all kinds of things can happen. Poetry, for me, exhibits this quality constantly. Emily Dickinson said, "Tell the truth, but tell it slant." And I've always loved that line, leave that space for the work of imagination. And, for me, I know the word hope is a contested word these days, and you work with it in some really interesting ways. But in a rough and crude sense, without doing, a full breakdown of the word hope, I feel that confronting the degradation of the boundary waters, which are newly threatened, as I'm sure you know, the degradation of the Colorado River, the environmental calamity and crisis generally, requires me at age 87 to cultivate something like hope, lest I fall into despair about all the work done over the years, not just by me, but by a lot of people I admire, love, respect, so many others, folks involved in movements that I've been part of, to use these opportunities to gain a deeper sense of identity with the natural world, with the cosmos. And just one quick reference to my own experience of COVID. Um, I know COVID has created a lot of resentment in this society. For me, it created a sense of identification, because a deeper sense of identification than I'd had before, with folks who live at high risk all around the world. Because suddenly in my early 80s, with an immune system condition, I found myself categorized by my doctor as at high risk. And for a moment or two, I think I was asking, why me? And then I realized, no, this gives me a chance to connect hearts and minds with people who are born into high risk and who live there forever. So at the moment, and I'd love to hear your response to your own question, that's where I go in my mind with that question.
You talk about the forest in the boundary waters, and I would equate that to the lodgepole pine forest in the Northern Rockies around Yellowstone and Grand Teton. One of the revelations for me growing up, because our family migrated there back and forth, was to learn that resurrection wasn't just about Jesus Christ. I grew up Mormon. Resurrection was about serotinous cones of the lodgepole pine that only opened when fire began, that they were opened by heat. And that was where the regenerative muscle was found.
Mm-hmm.
Middle of the burning, the seeds were deposited. Actually, before the burning, when the heat would rise, before the flames ever reached them, the cones would open, the seeds would drop, and the fire would move through. And the next season, and the next season, and the next season would show fireweed, would show the young sprouts. And I thought, that's resurrection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just today, I was reading the Salt Lake Tribune because I was concerned. The largest data center in the world has just been approved on the banks of Great Salt Lake that is in the process of retreating.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of water that would be used. Hundreds of people showed up in rural Utah, hundreds of people in one of the most red states in the United States. And there was so much dissent, both respectfully and in a rowdy way, meaning people were upset, that the commissioners left and could only face the crowd of dissenters who were calling for democracy. They would only talk to them through Zoom. The crowd just started shouting, shame, 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 save our lake, save our lake. And this is not what democracy looks like. And that to me is something deeper than hope. That is engagement, that is showing up, and that is happening all over the country, whether it's Minneapolis, whether it's in Salt Lake City, whether it's, in the most rural parts of our deepest South. And I feel that as we are watching democracy burn, we are those serotinous seeds that are being planted. And I think out of the troubles, we're going to have something emerge. It's going to take time, and it's going to take both our heartbreak and love. But I actually feel that we are alive. We are not taking democracy for granted. We are not taking Great Salt Lake for granted. We are not taking the Boundary Waters for granted. And I think these are moments where the Glorians are being called forth. And I find this an incredibly enlivening time.
Yeah, I do too. And I think you're exactly right. I mean, we think quickly of Minneapolis, for example, and what it taught us and how we make a deep bow to the folks who stepped into full citizenship at during zero weather, to say, no, this can't stand. This is wrong. This is not how democracy works. And I really deeply resonate with what you say about resurrection. I think for me, it's on two levels. One is surviving several very serious bouts of clinical depression and finding myself not only surviving, but thriving on the other side. And then secondly, from the Boundary Waters, having been there before the derecho came through around 2000 or a little before, and torched millions of acres of trees in this pristine wilderness area, because the derecho broke the trees off at half staff, and that the kindling was just left to hang there and dry, perfect conditions for fire. But then to return a year later and a year after that and a year after that, to see the rapidity of nature's recovery, and to realize that I'm not only part of the ecosystem that connects me with folks who were born and live at high risk, unlike me, but I'm also connected with the ecosystem that allows the Boundary Waters to rebound, to rise again, in such a profound and encouraging way.
And I feel that the animals are reaching out to us. The trees are reaching out to us. And for many years, I was quiet with my language. I was quiet with my beliefs. We cannot afford to be quiet anymore. I think we have to be bold. And one of the things that I committed to in writing the Glorians is I'm not holding back. When we had a collective prayer in the middle of the pandemic, it was worldwide. I remember calling Jonah Yellowman saying, can we pray together? He is a Diné medicine person. And he was praying in Monument Valley. I was praying in our little desert hamlet. And I took my as I walked outside to say prayers, I took my grandmother's handstone. That's what she called it. And when things were hard, she would hold this, her energy. And it was an amethyst on one side and a clear crystal on the other. It was one stone. And as I looked at it, I was stunned by the clarity. And as I held it, and we were invited to just close our eyes and feel the land itself speaking to us. And ahead is what's called Round Mountain. It's an ancient volcanic plug. In prayer, in this global moment, I saw this fire, this flame, move from the inside of Round Mountain and come towards me, closer and closer. My entire body started to heat up, and I felt that fire enter my heart. And the handstone became so hot, Parker, that I had to open my hand to release the heat. And I noticed that the handstone had cracked. And inside that crack was this flame. Now, some people could say, well, you've gone mad. Let them. That to me is a testament of what our collective energy can do. And that we are in dialogue, we are in conversation, we are in participation with a living, breathing planet we call home. And that to me, in those moments when I wonder how I'm going to be able to get up in the morning, despair, you mention it, I'm aware of the limits of my own imagination. But imaginations shared create collaboration, and collaboration, we create community. And I believe in community, anything is possible. And again, Utah, this is an example. Just yesterday, I got a call from one of the individuals who work for the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, is on their board. And Utah just recently put a bounty and opened up hunting on mountain lions because there have been sightings, because people have been afraid. Mountain lion, open season on mountain lions. And I think the mountain lions are saying, pay attention. Are you going to stand for this? Are you going to stand by and let us be killed? And I feel like there are these sacrifices that are being made on behalf of the land to wake us up. Again, that fire, the flame, the serotinous cones, planting those seeds. Who are we becoming if we say no? Who are we becoming if we say yes? And I think when that week when our president, on one hand, said, we will destroy civilization. I will destroy civilization in Iran. It sent a chill throughout the world. On that same day, we hear Christina Koch, the astronaut, say, looking at that sliver of Earth, we will always choose Earth. We will always choose each other. And how do we put these two hands together in prayer? An active prayer, as you speak of, a democracy that is rooted in the heart and give credibility and resonance and rigor to that which has remained hidden.
The human heart is the first home of democracy. One of the greatest lines and paragraphs that's ever been written, I think. I mean, it just turns your head around. And I have to say, Terry, just parenthetically, that I have never read you as someone who holds back or is prone towards silence. I think you've
I know
spoken
you haven't said, you know.
I think, in Quaker language, I've always respected the fact that you never got ahead of your leading. That's the way Quakers would say it. I guess athletes would say, don't get ahead of your skis. But and this latest book is just full of your leadings in that way. And I think the line I read earlier when I was going a little beyond the arc of the book to say, where you say, by reimagining home, we create a place and a peace for all we stand to gain, a livable future in a landscape of burning hearts that implores us to stay soft when things become hard and stay strong when things fall apart. That's not possible outside of community, is it?
No, and I love that. And I was looking at the principles of the Center for Courage and Renewal: integrity, authenticity, diversity, community, courage, love, hope, renewal. And all those qualities, those principles, I'm even going to say ethics, they live with us. They are in the places we call home, and they reside in the creatures we live among, the Glorians that we live among. I love Black widows. I know this sounds odd, And I've been bitten by one, and it was a 4 day hallucination. I wouldn't want to be bitten again. But there's something about spiders that they create out of themselves. I think they're aligned with writers. But we had I just want to share this one story. It's in the Glorians, but I'll tell it to you, or share it with you. Brooke was out of town. I was about to leave as well. And so I left him a sticky note on the wall next to our armoire, and where a black widow lived. And she had grown quite large, I have to say. Her belly, her abdomen was like a large blueberry. And so I just wrote, please take care of her, XXXT, and had an arrow pointing to where she lived. And Brooke got home, and what can I say? He took it literally. And so he fed her. And so for 3 weeks, he was feeding her grasshoppers, katydids, anything he could find. And when I got home, she was immense. It's like her body was a grape, a large grape. Anyway, Brooke was gone again. It was toward the end of the summer. It was hot. I couldn't sleep. And a friend had sent us 3 soundscapes. One was the Arctic, one was Costa Rica, one was the Sonoran Desert. And I thought that will give me peace. If I can't sleep, I can be in these landscapes. I put on the Arctic. I couldn't hear anything. I turned on a light, listened more closely, and if cold could be a growl, that's what I heard.
Mhm.
Costa Rica, I went into a panic attack because it sounded like the flash flood we had just endured. Turned it off, put on the Sonoran, and finally I heard insects I knew, coyotes, owls, and I felt my body relax.
Mhm.
And Parker, I saw this huge shadow on the wall, and I realized the Black Widow had come out to listen to those night sounds she knew too.
Wow.
And I wasn't scared, I was calmed. A woman and a Black Widow keeping each other company.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think in the midst of such losses that we've been talking about, there's still so much beauty that remains. And I love the word cohesion. You use the word wholeness, and with a bow to Merton. Again, it's what you say. We all have different names, but it's the same essence of things. And I was actually thinking, cohesion comes from the word cohere, which means hold together, which I love.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden I saw cohere, COHEAR. What can cohere together? How do we slow down, which you advocate for in every book you've written, whether it's the classroom or in a circle of care? How do we cohere together another way of being, another way of seeing that includes community, as you say, that includes all life forms, plants, animals, rocks, rivers, and human beings?
Mhm. This is one of the most powerful questions of our time, I think, and it takes us to the side of um, of action without uh, trying to calculate results, expressive action that says where our hearts are,
Mm.
which Gandhi said is the only kind that ever gets results. He said instrumental action, which is closely tied through the rational mind with means and ends, always has unintended consequences and always involves a lot of ego. But the expressive action of putting our hearts out there, the heart that is the first home of democracy and of cohesion, it seems to me. And we're now at such a low point that the imperative of community, I think, is becoming more and more clear to a lot of people. Um, to, I don't want to take much time to rehearse an old trope, but this society has lived with a huge illusion of rugged individualism and individuality generally, as if it was our job to make it on our own when no one has ever made it on his or her own. Um, but sometimes in expanding that definition, we limit it too closely to the human community. And you're calling us to really blow that out to cosmic proportions. And you're calling us to those, the sort of in extremis state where that becomes an inevitability. If we can feel it, if we can allow ourselves to feel the despair, the rage, the hopelessness alongside these experiences of grace, which the Glorians are all about, and get a new perspective on ourselves. I clearly remember a moment, Terry, in the high desert around Ghost Ranch in New Mexico, not far from where Georgia O'Keeffe had her home. I went out there on a 10-day silent solitary retreat some years ago. And one day, hiking in the desert, trying to keep very close track of where I was going because it's pretty easy for a greenhorn to get lost out there. I was passing by some of these uh, high cliffs that where you can see all the layers of rock as you can in the Grand Canyon. And burdened by my own troubles, um, I had the thought, and it was a thought, those rocks have seen it all. I'm just no, I'm just no big deal in their eyes, and I should stop being such a big deal in my eyes. And it was maybe a half hour after that that I was out there hiking deeper into the desert, and I had this sudden apprehension, in the sense of I apprehended something without thinking it, that on the one hand, I was an utterly insignificant speck in the vast thing we call the cosmos. And that on the other hand, simultaneously true, I was utterly accepted, forgiven, and blessed by the same cosmos, which, you know, I wish I could always have stayed closer to that experience, but some of it has stayed with me.
I love that paradox, like you say, um, utterly powerful, utterly insignificant at once, you know,
Mhm.
and loved in the
Yeah,
full
yeah,
sense.
yeah.
I think about our little town, and we had 5 flash floods in a matter of weeks, 2 summers ago. And we as a community had to really say, do we say that our community is now devastated? Or do we say we are being transformed? And we chose to look at it as a transformative moment. And at what I like to call a hard dinner party, a difficult dinner party, we invited everyone on our road, and it's a dirt road. Maybe we're neighbors, but we're not close in proximity, and we're in a community where people are there to be left alone. But when the floods came, we cohered, we gathered together, we held together. And when our mayor was saying, not my problem, it's private property rights, it was our neighbor, Charlene, who is MAGA all the way, a Trump supporter, who said it can no longer be about taking care of ourselves. It must now be taking care of each other. And that did include the whole community. And it was the Mormon patriarch, Richard Williams, who said around that difficult dinner party where none of us, if you looked on paper, we were all opposites. But it was after dinner where he said, I have a question for the table. Where does the water want to go?
Mm.
Dishes were cleared, maps were on the table, and with our fingers, we followed the path of water, and we saw whose land it went and where it went. And could we as a community follow that path of water and learn something? And so, 2 by 2, in the spirit of Mormon missionaries, we went to those private landowners and said, could we walk across your land? Will you join us? And we thought maybe 20 people would show up. There were 12 of us. We thought maybe 8 more. Close to 70 people showed up and walked
Mm,
a 3-mile path of water, and it changed us.
mm,
We broke bread together. And I believe we now are on a path of becoming a climate facing community against
mm,
all odds.
mm.
Against all odds. I think we are in a moment of transformation. It is not easy, but as a community, if we are present, we will know what to do.
Mm.
Have the strength not to look away, but to engage in something deeper than hope.
Yeah. One of the things, go ahead.
Yeah,
Excuse
just
me.
our own way, each in our own time, each in our own places. We are seeing that again and again, again. Against all odds, transformation is occurring.
Yes. One of the things I love about your book, Terry, is that you so clearly demonstrate that community doesn't have to be a big deal. In our, I think a lot of people hear the word community, especially political community, and they think of organizing the masses to do this or that and leading them, away from the downward path. But you live in a place with very few people um, who are still spread across the political spectrum, if such exists. And you come together in ways that are generative and encouraging for each and every person.
Because of the land. That's what we have in common. Everyone went around the table and talked about, we had new neighbors, so it was a dinner party for our new neighbors. Every person went around the table and said what they loved. And right
Mhm.
there, tenderness was born. A night sky of stars, coyotes howling, quiet, solitude, clouds, rainbows. It was common, the holy ordinary. And then what did that lead to? It led to origin stories, what brought us to this wild place. And then the humble expression from all of us that the very thing that brought us to this beautiful place, this erosional landscape, wind, water, and time, may be the very thing that asks us, forces us to leave.
Mhm.
That's how, and if we don't change, we will have to leave.
Mhm. Mhm.
And Utah's learning that north and south. If we do not figure out how to get water to Great Salt Lake, 3 million people along the Wasatch Front will be forced to leave because of the toxic air. The RLC has shown us that. And every community, I think, is this same story. We either change or we will not be able to live. It's that serious. And so the question then becomes, how serious are we?
Mhm.
Oh, here, can we find the hidden wholeness so that we can respond, so that we can be present, that we can love ourselves and the land and the community enough to change?
And I think that question in turn um, loops us back to something we were talking about earlier, which is the difficulty none of us knows the true name of
Mhm.
this quality that is within us and between us. That quality is not just an inward quality, it's a communal quality because community is the nature of reality, and everything that we do that tries to defy that fact just blows up in our faces. So, what we name the mystery within and between us matters because even though the word doesn't work for everyone, even though it can be awkward and even embarrassing in certain company to use such a word like Glorian, if we fail to name it, our image of who we are as human beings sinks to the lowest common denominator. And that has us then becoming objects to be manipulated, raw material to be produced by an economy that needs our labor and our money to buy stuff back. And so the stakes around the courage to use, I'll just call it roughly a spiritual language, or a language that sometimes, results in the people around you saying, "Say what? Are you off your rocker?"
My father being one of them. You
I'm
know,
sorry.
my father being one of them.
You're right. You have some wonderful father stories. Yeah, exactly. Um, the failure to lose that language or to use that language uh, is devolves us into so much less than we actually are.
Amen.
Maybe we should have called this session the Amen Corner. I don't know.
There's some questions from the beautiful people that are with us.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
wonderful. Thank you so much. Terry, you called us to engage in something deeper than hope, and I feel like that's exactly what we're doing in this conversation. So, Taylor, I believe, is going to open the chat back up, and if there are questions that any of you listening have been holding, that you'd love to put out into the space and see where it might take the conversation. I'll do my best to pay attention for those as they come in. I already see gratitude being expressed in the chat for this time. So much is coming up for me. I'll just name in listening to this conversation, frankly, thinking about dinner parties we've been wanting to host and ways to invite community and ways to connect with the land on which I live and in which I live. Um, it looks like there may also be a bit of resource sharing in the chat. I wonder, yeah, Terry, if you could say anything more about what it is that's deeper than hope. That's a question that is coming up.
I think it's our actions. You know, my grandmother always said, my great grandmother actually, the late Lee Romney, I was lucky enough to know her. And I must have been in junior high school. And she said, faith without works is dead. In other words, we can hope for something, but so often what I hope for is tied to my own desires. I think faith without works is dead. Our engagement, our body, our voices, our actions, our gestures. Um, you know, we can hope that the data center won't be built along the shores of Great Salt Lake. But what is that going to yield? Whereas we can have faith that our voice can stop it. And even though it's been approved, I can tell you there is so much reserve of action that is being expressed and is happening that I don't think it will happen. Because if democracy is alive, which it is in Utah right now, because our lives are at stake, it is ethically impossible to build a data center that is going to use all of the water that Great Salt Lake doesn't have.
Right.
And so that to me is faith without works is dead. Faith with works is alive. And that's what I mean by something deeper than hope.
And, and Terry, I just want to say this puts us on real home ground for the Center for Courage and Renewal because we operate with a notion of the tragic gap, which is this gap between what could and should be and the harsh realities around us. And I've had a working definition of hope that it involves staying acutely aware of the tragic gap and every day trying to do something that closes the distance between those two a little. So it's an active definition that
And we all have a piece in that mosaic, in that active definition. I mean, I love that Marna here, who's involved with the center, was telling us before we went live of her butterfly made of people. You know, whether we're artists, whether we're writers, whether we're cooks, whether we're Congress people, whether we're legislators, whether we're teachers, every one of us has a role to play. And Parker, you talk about that so beautiful soul and role. And this is soul work. It's soul work, and democracy is soul work. And it requires every one of us. And I think we've gotten complacent. We're not complacent anymore. And that is a blessing.
Yeah, it is. The great thing about soul work and democracy is you don't have to finance public opinion polls to find out where you're going. You just find your North Star and go there.
Parker, you of course have written about your experiences with depression, and both of you have referenced just the way that despair is a visitor during these times. One question that we've gotten from Allison is, are there insights, kind of deepenings that have come to you during times of depression or maybe afterwards that are actually still alive and shaping you now, maybe particularly in these times?
Yeah, for sure. And I know that her question also asked about resurrection in that context. And I always try to speak. I want to speak about depression because so many people suffer from it, and they need to know that it's not the end of the road necessarily. Um, but in my case, I've always said I don't know how I managed to survive and thrive. I don't understand that. There's a mystery at the heart of that for me. There's no 12 steps or to-do process. I do understand why people take their lives. I understand that deeply and empathetically because it's just so exhausting to be depressed. And you finally get to the point that you can't take another step. What I, what I, what I emerging from depression was an experience of resurrection in life for me. And what it taught me was pay attention. Pay attention to yourself. Tell yourself and others close to you the truth about what's going on in your life. Get it outside your head. Be as honest as you possibly can. If you don't have friends or family with whom you can do that, do it with a therapist. But tell the truth, stay alert to the signs, and then be proactive about getting ahead of those signs. There's often a deeper calling in that kind of suffering that somehow one is on the wrong track with this or that in one's life. Maybe the work you're doing, maybe a relationship you have, maybe what you have embraced as the limits of your own life because of cultural negativity related to who you are. So those are a few things that are takeaways for me that have been very serviceable. And I think some of them at least are relevant to this conversation.
Yeah, I know we don't.
I was just going to say, we're not alone. We're not alone. We live among multitudes of beings. Call them small gods. Some we can see, some we cannot. Some that live inside our bodies, some that live in the forest, the ecotones, the meadows, wherever we are. And I think we can call them forward and learn from them. And there was a question that came up about the metaphor of fire, that can be instructive, whether it's depression, whether it's literal fires. During the pandemic, in the American West, we had 8 million acres burning. I suspect we may have more of that this summer. And I wondered if I could just close with a piece from a burning testament. To the power of these burning, illuminated Western lands that have shaped our character, inspired our souls, and restored our belief in what is beautiful and enduring, I will never write your obituary, because even as you burn, you are throwing down seeds that will sprout and flower. Trees will grow and forests will rise again as living testaments to how one survives change. It is time to grieve and mourn the dead and believe in the power of renewal. If we do not embrace our grief, our sadness will come out sideways in unexpected forms of depression and violence. We must find a proper ceremony to collectively honor the dead from the coronavirus, as more than 1 million citizens have been lost, to all the species we are losing now. We must honor the lives engulfed in these Western fires and the lives we will continue to lose from climate crisis at hand, each in our own home grounds. Only then can we begin the work of restoration and renewal, respecting the generations to come as we clear a path toward cooling a warming planet. This will be our joy. Let this be a humble tribute, an exaltation, an homage, and an open-hearted eulogy to all we are losing, to fire, to floods, to hurricanes and tornadoes and war, and the invisible virus that has called us all home and brought us to our knees. May we remember this and raise a fistful of ash to all the lives lost that it holds. To bear witness to this moment of undoing is to find the strength and spiritual will to meet the dark and smoldering landscapes where we live. We can cry. Our tears will fall like rain in the desert and wash our skins of ash so our pores can breathe, so our bodies can breathe back the lives that we have taken for granted. I will mark my heart with an X made of ash to say the power to restore life resides here. The future of our species will be decided here, not by facts, but by love and loss. Hand on our heart, I pledge allegiance to the only home I will ever know.
Amen.
Thank you. That is a beautiful closing. And I want to hold just a couple more moments if there are any other closing words either of you have. If I can, I'd also like to lift up, maybe as a frame for that closing, another question that came in the chat, which is actually from Gianna, who says that she's in her 20s and is really asking a question about wisdom, that you hope that younger generations will embody as we all work together to build a world we don't have to leave. And so I wonder if there's anything that comes up to you in response to that, either wisdom from a time perhaps we don't remember, maybe wisdom from a species or a landscape that we don't necessarily always pay attention to. Just if you might think of, yeah, think through that lens as a way of closing out our time.
I defer to you, dear Parker. I think all of us feel enlivened, deepened, and in many ways, souls healed when we hear you, when we read your words. I would love to end this with your words.
Well, this has been such a privilege, Terry, and I'm a little teary at the moment. And so I want to say, trust the tears. I know you do. I do too. The gift of tears, as some ancient theologian had it. And I also want to say, and Catherine, remind me of the name of the person who asked the question.
I believe it's Gianna. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly.
I also want to say to Tiana that I take a lot of hope from your generation. I believe you're in your 20s, and I really delight in the relationships I have with people in your generation and the ones just a bit older than you as well, where I see so much paying attention and so much speaking up and so much searching for ways to connect that don't bemoan the conditions of modern society, as in technology, for example, but make best use of them and supplement them with face-to-face time, which for me is always critical. And I want to say, trust friendship, not just the friends you've made face-to-face, but the friends you make by reading people, by hearing about people, by remembering people. And if there is a tree or an animal or a landscape in your life that feels befriending, it's a Glorian too, and a space of grace, as Terry Tempest Williams has so beautifully said. So immerse yourself. Go for it.
Thank you, Parker. I love you. I can say that. And to everyone that's joined us, and Catherine and Marna and uh, Taylor, everyone. Blessings.
I love you, Terry. And next time, coffee in the Red Rock Desert with you and your husband.
The doors are wide open. We'll come get you.
Terry and Parker, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for being here and for being a part of creating this space for this conversation. I want to also thank you especially for supporting the work of the Center for Courage and Renewal. Every one of you who joined us today did so by way of a contribution to our work. And you help us continue to create spaces and communities where these kinds of questions can be held and shared. I want to invite all of you to continue the conversation however that might happen, whether it's within yourself and what has emerged for you during this time, whether it's in your own spaces where you live, and also to invite you to continue the conversation at an open drop-in that we're going to be hosting on Tuesday, May 12th at 3 in the afternoon Eastern Time. And what this is just an hour to connect with others around the themes from this conversation. And so we would really love for you to join us. There's going to be a link in the chat where you can offer feedback for this time that will be shared certainly and considered by us at the Center for Courage and Renewal, but we'll also share with Parker and Terry as well. You can, of course, also leave notes in the chat if you would like. There also in the chat are some links to places on our website, our program calendar, and other resources. Terry referenced our core values that we use at the Center for Courage and Renewal, our principles and practices, our touchstones. All of these are available on our website for you to look at, to download, to use, to consider supporting you in other spaces that you hold and in the ways of being that you explore as you show up in the world. If you are expecting to receive a book because of the contribution that you made, the level of contribution that you made when you registered, those books will be in the mail by next week. And I also want to extend just an open invitation for your continued support of the Center for Courage and Renewal. We're in a fundraising campaign right now where any gifts that are given between now and the end of June 30th will be matched by generous matching contributions. And for those of you who are able to give gifts of $500 or more, you're going to receive a special invitation for an event with Parker, who has generously offered a space to ask him anything. And we'd love to have you join us for that.
I'm sure this will be one of the biggest mistakes of my life, but hey.
I can't wait.
So thank you again, Terry, Parker, so much. What just a privilege and honor to be with you. I'm so grateful for the time today. We have been among friends, and what an incredible space to be. As we close, I actually want to invite those of you who are still with us to come off mute. You can say your own goodbyes or your thank yous, whatever you'd like to in the space. I know there are a lot of us, but
many thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Renewal.
Thank
Thank
you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you with gratitude.